Welcome to Moxie Bets, presented by Caesars Sportsbook. I'm your host, Katie Mox. Coming up on today's show, we have a very special guest today, an odds maker at Caesars Sportsbook. We'll get into what factors into setting some odds for your favorite sports to bet on. It's also time to get book smart. We'll take a look at some notable betting trends throughout the NFL season. And of course, you know it, you've got some Mox Locks coming your way. Before we get started, let's welcome in our very special guest from Caesars Sportsbook, Assistant Director of Trading, Adam Pullen. Adam, how's it going?
Good, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I have so much to get into. So we're going to start things off with Mox Thought. Adam, something that all of us bettors ponder on a daily basis is, how does Vegas know? How do they do it? How are they always right on the money with the odds or the total or the spread? So let's get into this like a little bit deeper. So what factors into setting the odds or the spread or the total for a game? And how do you guys always get it right?
Well, we don't always get it right. We're probably more wrong than we are right. But whenever it happens, when a game lands right on the spread, people will bring that up. But no, look, the process of setting lines varies from person to person. Myself, I do it by feel. Some people keep power ratings. Some people run models. And a lot of times line setting within our book could be a variety of people coming together and just each giving their line. And then we come to a consensus number based on everybody's opinion. But everybody has their own ways of doing things, and everybody's different. But we have a lot of people in the office that are respected, and we use everybody's opinion, and that crafts our opening number in a lot of cases.
So does each sport have different criteria that you look at?
Yeah, basically, now it's predominantly injuries. Injuries are going to move the line more than anything, especially NBA. You have players sitting out constantly from game to game. NFL, obviously the big injury this week with Jalen Hurts. But injuries are the big thing. Weather is a big factor as well. Of course, we're getting into the late part of the season where weather is going to affect things. And you see this week a lot of low totals out there due to the big Arctic blast that's coming in. So injuries and weather are probably two big factors. And then, of course, talking about NFL, you get to this part of the year and it's situational based. How a team that needs to win versus a team that doesn't need to win and is playing out the string. So those factors come into play as well. But injuries are the main thing that drastically moves the lines, and that we just have to keep an eye out for, just like everybody else.
Well, you say keep an eye out there like everybody else, and I do believe you, but I feel like Vegas always seems to know about injuries before they happen. Sometimes I'll see that there's a big line change. I'm like, wait, this must mean some kind of big injury. So how are you guys monitoring injuries throughout the season? Because it seems like you have your finger on the pulse, even more so than the betting public does.
Well, look, everything runs through social media nowadays. Beat writers are on Twitter. The news is quick and is readily available. So we're monitoring that just like everybody else is. And it's just a matter of getting to that information first, before the bettors do, to try and take advantage of a stale number if a certain player like a Jalen Hurts is out or a LeBron James is not playing tonight. Obviously, that's going to drastically move the number. So, we just need to be on top of it. But I think ourselves and the bettors are using the exact same resources. We don't have any inside information. We don't have inside contacts at the teams. So we're relying on the same information that's out there, just like everyone else.
I love that you said that about the beat writers, because so many people say don't bet with your heart, right? Don't back your own teams. But if it's your team and you love it, you're following those beat writers, so you know what's happening more than everybody else. So that's just actually just like a really good tip, I feel like, for all bettors, is follow the beat writers if you want to really know what's going on with the team. One other question I had for you is the difference between college football and NFL. Is there a difference in the way that you set those odds? Obviously, we know that college is not that great at defense, and that's why we see some of those totals really high. But what would you say some of the key differences are?
Well, probably the big problem is not a problem, but the issue between college and pro is that in college are just so much more many teams to book. NFL, we have 32 teams. Information on all NFL teams is pretty much well known. We all know the players. College, there's over 300 Division I college teams in basketball alone. So it's hard to keep track of all those player injuries and everything that's going on with those teams. So just the nature of having more teams makes it more difficult to book college sports and set lines for college sports than pro sports. The NFL, the results for the NFL for the books have been great year after year. The lines are pretty solid in the NFL. College, you're going to have a lot more a lot more volatility than the NFL will. Injuries come into play obviously in college just as much, but it's just that information and keeping track of all of those different teams compared to the relatively small amount of teams that the pro leagues have.
I agree. Just from a betting perspective, I almost never touch college sports because how could you possibly know everything that is going on? So I give a lot of credit to people who are setting the odds and also betting on college sports religiously. So now I have more of a personal question for you. How did you get into this? And was it more the numbers? Were you a big math guy always? Have you always been a big sports guy? Like, what if somebody wants to be an odds maker? How do they do that?
Well, it's a lot different. I've been in the business since 1995. I came out to Las Vegas to go to UNLV after switching majors a bunch of times and not knowing what I wanted to do. I fell into this business. I had a friend that worked at Caesar's Palace. So ironically, my first job in the business was at Caesar's Palace. And now we've come full circle. So I just sort of fell into it. That was the opportunity at the time. And of course, I'm a big sports fan. And I was drawn to the business. And I was mentored by someone at Caesars a long time ago that even as a ticket writer or somebody who wasn't in a supervisory position, helped me, learn how to set numbers. And, I was making numbers when I was, not in charge. So
Wow.
he put that responsibility on and I just grown and grown. And, look, if you're a sports fan, it's a great job. But now it's a lot different than it was, back in 1995 when I started. It's a totally different business. So a math background definitely helps. An analytic background definitely helps. In that respect. So, but for me, it wasn't anything I came out here to do. It just sort of came about and fell into my lap. I had a friend that worked at Caesars and said, "Hey, why don't you come apply for a job?" And like I said, the rest is history. So, but I've enjoyed it every minute. There's never a dull day in this business. Like I said, if you love sports, it's a great business to be in.
How stressful is it for an odds maker, right? Because we set the bets and we're sweating it out the whole time. Are you guys also sweating out bets, or are you just a little bit more removed? Or not bets, the odds, I guess the bet that the book took.
Yeah, no, everybody's different. I'm one, I don't worry about what I can't control.
Yeah.
I don't have any emotional swings based on what happens in a game, whether, it's a 7-figure loss for us or a 7-figure win. Doesn't make my heart rate, go up or down or get me depressed in any way. Look, we book the games like we do every single day. We book the same way. And look, in this business, you can do everything right and still lose. Whether you're a bettor or a bookmaker, you could get the best. You can get 4 points best of the closing number in a game you bet and still lose. Years ago, there's games, that move multiple points, double-digit points, and you still don't win. And it's disconcerting. But, look, we do the same thing we do every day. And, we let the players on the field dictate the results, and whatever happens, happens. So speaking for myself, I don't get very emotional and don't get too high off of wins and don't get too low off of losses. So, but everybody is different.
They say, totally. And they say any given Sunday, anything can happen. You could do all of the research in the world, and sometimes the worst team beats the best team. And, those are some of the greatest games to watch. And, if you're on the underdog in it, then you feel really good about it. One other question I had is that you see odds change from state to state. What kind of factors into that, and why are they different?
It's very rare that, that we offer a different line in a different state. The line is, we're not going to gouge people in New York if they want to bet the Giants or the Jets or the Yankees or the Mets.
Right.
So we don't do that. The line is what the line is pretty much for everywhere around the country, no matter where you are and on what team. So that's pretty much our policy.
That's a great policy because not every book does that. I have seen different lines from state to state. So that's just another reason to bet with Caesars.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I can't speak for anybody else, but, it's certainly, we don't want to play, gouge customers in one area just because they're in that locality and they want to bet that team. So, we have to put the whole big picture together for the whole country, not just worry about, booking New York differently than we book Louisiana for the Saints or LSU, who they bet heavily. So we try and keep it all the same, and we pretty much do 100 or 99.9% of the time. So I think that's a strategy that we've adopted, and I think it's the right way to do things.
It's absolutely the right way to do things. And again, why you should bet with Caesars. With Caesars Sportsbook and Casino, every bet earns with Caesars Rewards. That means whether you win or lose, you're always earning towards perks like free stays at iconic Caesars properties, game tickets, dining, and more. And if you haven't started yet, here's a reminder. Your first bet is on Caesars, up to $1,250. Download the app with promo code OMAHAFULL and place your first bet. If you win, congrats. If you don't, you'll get it back as a free bet. It's time to get book smart. Let's welcome back our guest, Adam from Caesars Sportsbook. Adam, let's dive into some trends that you are seeing this season and what's coming up for week 16. There's a lot to unpack here with the Eagles and the Cowboys. Eagles are 13-1 going up against their NFC East divisional rival, the Dallas Cowboys. This line has done backflips. Philly opened up, I believe, as a 1-point favorite. And with the injury news from Hurts, it was all the way up to having them be a 6-point dog. And I think right now it's settled at 5 on Caesars. You can correct me on that. I doubt this is the last time that we're going to see this line move. It seems like a lot of bettors are still on Minshew mania. They're not really buying the flip here. Tell me more about this movement and what you think.
Well, yeah, no, Monday, the news sort of, I guess, leaked out somewhere, and we started seeing a rash of bets on Dallas, and the spread was going up. Dallas was actually a small favorite, I think, when we opened it up Sunday after the Sunday games. Line went up all the way up to 6. Now it's back down to 5. The MVP odds, there's a lot of bets coming in on Patrick Mahomes because it alters that. So, we put 2 and 2 together and then took the game down for a little bit. Then the news came out that, Jalen Hurts might have to miss this game. Now they're sort of backtracking. They're saying he may play. But, look at the game. It's Eagles-Cowboys. It's the biggest rivalry in the NFL. So there's a lot of gamesmanship going on. So we'll see if Hurts actually plays. Obviously, if he does play, he won't be 100%, but the line will drop further. If it comes out that Minshew's definitely playing, might creep up a little bit. But look, the Eagles are not a one-man show, even though Jalen Hurts has had a phenomenal year.
Yeah.
The Eagles have a solid running game. Their defense is great. So, yes, Jalen Hurts is better than Gardner Minshew. But look, this isn't Gardner Minshew's first rodeo. He's played in the NFL before. He started games. So the Eagles are more than Hurts. Obviously, they'd like to have him, and they'd like to definitely clinch the number 1 seed in Dallas. Nothing would make them more happy, but they have to look at the big picture. But, for this week, we have to go by what the latest news is. And, the lines come down because of them saying, well, Hurts may play, but we'll see what happens. I think it's a lot of gamesmanship, but, the Eagles have to look at the big picture. They got 2 winnable home games in which they can clinch that number 1 seed coming up after this week. So, but yeah, anytime you have a starting quarterback in the NFL, and especially the MVP favorite as of last week, if he's questionable, the odds are going to shift dramatically.
And maybe there is no standard, but is there kind of a standard shift or dock in the line for a starting quarterback to go down? Is it usually 3 points, 5 points?
It depends who it is. I mean, obviously, and it depends on the caliber of the team as well. The 49ers, we didn't see that big a drop when Brock Purdy replaced Jimmy Garoppolo. If a team is good, they're good, and they can withstand those losses more than others. But it all depends on who the backup is. Joe Burrow goes out, that might be a bigger discrepancy because Allen is not the most tested quarterback. But it just depends who their backup is and the overall strength of the team. But again, look, we've seen it time and time again where backup quarterbacks come in and they win games. Talking about Eagles, Cowboys, Cooper Rush, got the Cowboys close late in the game. Eagles end up winning by 2 scores, but it was close late in the game. So there's no reason why Gardner Minshew, if he were to start, were to go into Dallas and win, it wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, look, Dallas just almost lost to the Texans, so anything's possible. But it's not as easy as just looking, well, Hurts is out, the Eagles have no chance. It's definitely not the case. Their record is what it is for a reason, and it's not just Jalen Hurts, even though he has a lot to do with it. But yeah, quarterback injuries obviously shift the line the most, but it just depends on the overall quality of the team and who the backup is. If it's a first-time starter, then yeah, it's probably going to affect the line more than someone who has played in the NFL before and started games.
Okay, yeah, and Minshew, of course, has a lot of games under his belt, and
Mhm.
like you said, I don't think it's that far of a drop off. And you can't necessarily trust the Cowboys right now. I mean, they just lost to the Jags last week. So let's talk about this MVP. You kind of alluded to it already with Jalen Hurts and the MVP. He was the favorite, and now with this injury, which is not long term, and like you said, he might play. I think Sirianni's kind of playing with us a little bit. I don't think that he is actually going to play this week. But we saw that his MVP odds plummeted. He's no longer the favorite. He's behind Patrick Mahomes, and he's at plus 550. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, pretty crazy. Like I mentioned before, I saw that the move Monday, combined with the move on Dallas and the move on Patrick Mahomes to start taking a lot of bets. We put two and two together and figured that Hurts was out. But yeah, quite a drastic change. It was kind of a two-horse race between Mahomes and Hurts. Now judging by the odds, it's a one-man race with Patrick
Yeah.
Mahomes. You have the $3 favorite to win MVP. Hurts, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow all at 5.5 to 1. So it looks like a race for second for now. But look, anytime you get late in the season, injuries happen. It's in a market like this, in an MVP that's voted on. It's a lot different than any other future. I mean, look, if Jalen Hurts isn't playing and Patrick Mahomes is, that's
Yeah.
not good for his MVP chances.
Right.
And even if he might play one more game, Mahomes might play three more games. So obviously, Mahomes, he's leading in passing yards, leading in touchdown passes, has a few more interceptions this year than normal, but Mahomes is definitely the favorite. He's putting up consistent numbers. He had a good week last week, even though they barely beat the Texans. Burrow had 4 touchdowns last week, only 200 yards. Hurts had a good game as well. No passing touchdowns, a couple interceptions, but 3 rushing touchdowns. But basically, it comes down to when you get here late in the season in an MVP or an awards market, it's what have you done for me lately? People react to what
Yes.
they saw last. And look, if Jalen Hurts isn't playing and Patrick Mahomes is and puts up decent numbers, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, that's just going to cement his role as a favorite. And if Jalen Hurts doesn't play, he's likely to go behind Burrow and Josh Allen if they have good games. So you need to be playing. And even though Jalen Hurts, obviously, if he shut it down right now, there'd be no issue with giving him the MVP award. He's done phenomenally this year. But
Yeah.
yeah, but he's not. If he's not playing, that hurts his MVP chances.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've seen the line for the Cowboys game flip, obviously in favor of the Cowboys with this injury. We've seen it plummet for MVP, at least Jalen Hurts, and it makes sense because there's only one person. But as far as like the futures odds for the Eagles, they haven't really seemed to move for Super Bowl and of course to win the conference. Do you expect if he is injured longer or if Minshew plays well or plays bad that these odds will kind of shift for the Eagles for the conference and also for the Super Bowl?
I don't think too much. Unless Jalen Hurts is ruled out for the rest of the year, then obviously they'll change. Now it sounds, at least what they're saying, it sounds like it's a week to week type of thing. So obviously you're not going to drastically move the Super Bowl odds when it
Right.
looks like, for the information we know now, that he will be back for the playoffs. If that changes, and obviously that's going to be, a drastic change from going from Jalen Hurts to Gardner Minshew. Not a huge shift, not like the odds are going to be doubled, but the odds would go up if Jalen Hurts were to be ruled out for the year. But that's why there wasn't any major change with the Eagles' future odds, knowing that this is a week-to-week injury and not something that's a long-term injury. So if that news comes out, then obviously that will change.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Now let's take a look at what's been dominating the betting space this year, the under. It's a
Mm-hmm.
tricky time of year right now for bettors and I'm sure odds makers as well, considering some teams have already clinched a playoff spot, so they'll likely be conservative with their starters. Do you factor that in to setting these totals? Do you expect the last couple weeks to be lower scoring as they have been pretty much all season?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, look, each team has their own strategy on how they're going to address, the last few weeks. I mean, obviously, you want to keep your players healthy if it's a meaningless game. There's really no reason to put your quarterback out there for no reason if it doesn't affect, your playoff positioning and possibly getting a home game. So, yeah, that's definitely factored in. Obviously, late in the season, especially week 18, is sometimes it's like a preseason week.
Yeah.
There are some games that obviously have implications for the playoffs, but a lot don't. And so that's why it's tough in these later weeks to set lines on these games. Until we find out what their strategy is. But obviously the factor, having weather as a factor late in the year that hurts as well. We have to keep constant contact on that. You've seen this week, you have a total of 32 on a game, which is, you don't see those hardly at all.
That's
Yes,
low.
yeah, but scoring's been down, and it could be a variety of reasons. I mean, a couple of reasons. Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are having off years. Those two teams are normally, light up the scoreboard. That's not happening. But, maybe it's just the quarterback play is just not that good this year. I mean, just looking at the weekly passing yards over under, so these quarterbacks, you see a lot of ones that are barely over 200 or sub 200. So the quarterback position, maybe not performing as well as it has in previous years. But yeah, definitely the unders have been coming in more. And obviously, when there's more unders, that's more advantageous for the books, as the public loves to bet overs more than they do
Yeah.
unders. So
Yeah, they definitely do, especially for those quarterbacks that you mentioned that are having bad years. The public and myself, it's still Tom Brady in prime time. It's still Aaron Rodgers in prime time. They got to be able to make this happen. And, more times than not, they're not making it happen.
yeah.
But we always say the NFL is a jungle out there, right? But the big cats have really come out to play this season. Both the Lions and the Jags are making surprising runs towards the postseason. The Lions have turned their season around after a 1-6 start. They are now 7-7 after their win last week over the Jets. The Jags are now second in the AFC South with a 6-8 record, coming off a big overtime win themselves. What are you seeing with these two teams? Do you think either of them can make the playoffs?
Well, I think the Lions can definitely make the playoffs. I mean, they've been one of the great stories with their sudden reversal of fortune in the second part of the season. They won 6 out of the last 7 games. And I looked up their losses. I mean, look who they've lost to. They lost to the Eagles, Buffalo by 3 points. I think they lost to Seattle by 3. They lost to Miami by 4, and Minnesota by 4. I mean, those are close losses. Their record could be much better. They could be solidly in the playoffs if they win a couple of those games. And the combined records of those teams that they've lost to, 67-31. I looked it up, and that's phenomenal. So, and they got to win. They got a good schedule coming up. They got at Carolina. They got the Bears, I believe, at home. Then a possible, Week 18 game at Green Bay, which could be difficult. They generally don't fare well in Green Bay. But no, they've been a tremendous success story. Campbell's done a great job with the Lions, and they're half a game out of the playoffs, but definitely the way they're playing, there's no reason why they can't make the playoffs. And it would be, just a truly great story. They've struggled in recent years. And, I know I work with a big Lions fan and I hear it all the time about how bad they've been. So, but no, what they've done is phenomenal. And the teams that they've lost to, I mean, they only had one bad loss. They lost 29-0 to New England earlier in the season. That's really their only bad loss. And just seeing how they've kept it close against a lot of good teams, that just shows how good they are. I mean, we look a few weeks ago, the big story was how are the Detroit Lions with the losing record favored over the Vikings, who were a 10-win team. It just shows you the respect that the line makers give to the Lions. They're not as bad as their record was. So they have the respect, and they're proving it on the field. As far as the Jaguars go, I mean, last year was just a lot of turmoil, obviously, with the Urban Meyer debacle. And you bring in Doug Peterson, Super Bowl winning coach. He's righted the ship. Started off, I think they were 2-1 early. They struggled midseason, but now coming out 3 out of 4 wins after the bye, 6 out of their last 7, I think, wins. But yeah, they have definitely turned it around. They have a little more work to do, more than the Lions do, to get in the playoffs. I think they're a couple of games back, but yeah, and a great win last week coming back against Dallas. So, and Trevor Lawrence is playing phenomenally. So yeah, it's nice to see, nice to see those two teams, getting into playoff contention. So, and we'll see if they can keep it up the last few weeks of the season.
Yeah, and when you think about them preseason, obviously you guys set the win totals, the season win totals every year. What kind of goes into factoring how a team will fare throughout the season?
Well, a lot of it we're looking at last season, what happened last season, and then looking at player additions during the off season. Looking obviously at their schedule. Obviously we know their divisional schedule, who they playing out of division, who they playing in their opposing conference. So that has a lot to do with it as well. So it's always interesting to go back after the season is over and find out, all right, where were we wrong? Where were we right? Look at teams like Seattle. Everybody thought Seattle was just going to be atrocious. And they've, here they are sitting at 500 late in the season. A lot of teams, Atlanta was thought to be really bad, really bad. And now they played above their expectations. So, but that's all we have to go to until we see these teams on the field. There's really, you can't definitely say, all right, this team's not going to be good or this team's going to be great until we get the teams on the field. We're just really guessing. And, when we set the odds way early before the season starts. So, it's a lot of last year and just, us prognosticating on how we think the new additions are going to be and what their schedule is. So, yeah, it's definitely, but like I said, it's interesting to go back at the end of the year and look at the preseason projections and see where they finished up. It's eye-opening sometimes.
Yeah, and like any given Sunday, any given season, it goes pretty much for everything. So this past weekend, we saw some huge comebacks, and I'm curious what you think of these comebacks and if these teams are contenders or more of pretenders. The Vikings, of course, won 39-36 in overtime, but they fell 33 at halftime to the Colts. The
Mhm.
Jags also trailing 27-10, and then they came back and ended up winning the game over Dallas. And then, of course, the Bengals were down 17 to Tom Brady, and they came back for a huge win. How should bettors be reacting to this, or how are odds makers reacting to this? Are you looking at someone like the Vikings as that was a fluke and they really are contenders, or maybe just a little bit more pretenders, or someone like Joe Burrow? I feel like you can't count that guy out. So what do you think of these comebacks, and how does that factor in how you set their odds this week?
It factors in. Obviously, we're looking at what happened in their previous game, but I mean, look, it mainly affects, a lot of people love to bet in play. It affects the in play betting. It sort of changes your rationale on how you bet. I mean, look, no lead is safe. Obviously, we saw it with the Vikings this past week. But, Joe Burrow being down, 17, I think they're down 17 nothing, being down two scores. We've seen plenty of comebacks like that. It's definitely, when you see that many, within 1 week, that's, all those big comebacks, it's quite interesting. But, mainly it affects the in-play betting. If you're seeing a team, up a lot and you think they have it in the bag, you definitely got to be thinking twice. You can't be laying those big numbers, heavy juice to win a little when a comeback is possible. Look, sometimes they don't happen. It's just so happens that we saw the biggest comeback in NFL history, and we saw those two other comebacks you mentioned. But it definitely affects in-play betting, and how the public wants to address that, and whether they want to lump on the dog if they get down early because they think, hey, we've seen this a couple of teams come back. I'm going to take the big price, and it should make people give them more trepidation than saying, all right, well, this team's up 17, they got in the bag, and I'm going to lay a lot to win a little on an in-play bet. But for pre-match, betting and setting the lines before the game starts doesn't really factor. It doesn't really factor in. Look, the Vikings are an interesting case study. We've said it, and I mentioned it earlier. It's par for the course with the Vikings. Just they're just not showing the respect. Their lines, people always question why their lines so low, but the proof's in the pudding. They win a
Yeah.
lot of close games. But bottom line is they win games, and I think if Kirk Cousins can sort of shed that big game. Faltering in those big games. Some games he does well, obviously, but a lot of it's the defense. The defense isn't very strong. So when you put all the pressure on Kirk Cousins to go out and win these games, if the defense keeps giving up points over and over, obviously that puts more pressure on him. But there's no reason to think that he can't get hot for a 3-game stretch and lead his team to the Super Bowl. So I know he's much maligned, and I know it seems like crazy talk. You're grimacing as I say it, but look, he doesn't have the confidence of a lot of people because he's faltered in those big games. But look, bottom line is they got the wins. They're in the playoffs, and we'll see if he can craft a run together. But the line, people are going to be definitely hesitant on the Vikings just because of all their close victories. But again, bottom line is they got the wins regardless of how they
Yeah.
do it. But you can't be that lucky and keep tempting fate week after week. So
Right.
the
Yeah,
Vikings,
and he's
you know,
yeah, and Cousins obviously has some great weapons around him, certainly with Justin Jefferson.
sure.
All right, let's talk about my favorite subject, Adam, and that's the San
Mhm.
Francisco 49ers. Now, we have suffered some heartbreaking injuries this year. Of course, Trey Lance went out second game of the season. Jimmy Garoppolo breaks his foot in week 13. He could come back in the playoffs. We'll have to see. Looking like maybe not. And then we got Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy goes from Mr. Irrelevant to the GOAT and Hawk Slayer. I mean, he went into Seattle and won. He beat Tom Brady at home with 100 of his close friends and family there. It's interesting to me when I look at this because the 49ers started out pretty favorable. And then, when Jimmy came in, it seems like the odds got almost like less favorable for bettors because, of course, everybody had more confidence in him. And then, of course, Jimmy goes down and we see kind of a dip in those odds for the 49ers futures. And then now that Purdy is looking pretty good again, it seems like he's getting respect from both odds makers and the betting market. And the Niners are pretty good up there in the odds for the Super Bowl and for the conference. Have you seen more bettors piling in on the Niners in recent weeks with how well Purdy's been playing?
Well, the Niners are always a very popular bet within the Caesars empire.
Yeah.
It's, we have, here in Nevada, in northern Nevada, just all Niners fans, and every year we're sweating out a Niners Super Bowl win. So obviously
Ah.
they're our biggest liability this year.
Ooh.
So people are lumping on, and for good reason. I mean, look, yes, Jimmy G went down, but I think a lot of people say Jimmy Garoppolo is not the reason solely for their success. We talked about it with Jalen Hurts a
Yeah.
little while ago. Look, they have a solid team around them. Their defense is phenomenal. They run the ball well. Basically with Brock Purdy, you just needed him to come in and not make the big mistake. You don't need him to throw over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns a game. You don't need to put it all on his shoulders. So it's not going to be that big. There's not that big gap between Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo, in my opinion. Maybe a couple of points on the line, but look, as he's shown, he's done very well. Came in against Miami, no problem. Beat Tampa, no problem. Won at Seattle. So there's no reason to think he can't continue this. I mean, look, he was a great quarterback in college at Iowa State. So he played in a lot of big games in the Big 12. Obviously, this is not the Big 12. This is the NFL. But still, you can't argue with what he's done so far. And I think San Francisco is a team well equipped to withstand Jimmy G's loss. And until Brock Purdy has a bad game, if he does, then yes, of course, the naysayers will come out and say, well, he can't have, they can't win with him. But look, he's our quarterback for now. He's shown no sign of faltering under the spotlight. He's done very well. And like I said, he doesn't need to go out and win the game. He, just needs to fit in that system and just not make that big mistake. And I think the Niners should be fine regardless of who's under center.
Wow, the Niners are the biggest liability. You love to hear that. I'm very excited about that. So let's take a look at this Super Bowl with the contenders right now. Bills, of course, the favorite, plus 340. Then Chiefs, Eagles, Niners, Bengals, Cowboys, and the list goes down from there. What have you been seeing with these teams? Who's starting to rise and who's starting to fall? Is there anyone that bettors have been backing that have been kind of like inching up?
Well, I think the Chargers now that they're coming on a little. I mean, they've been very maligned in recent years. Everybody's been expecting them the last 2 years to get in the playoffs and make a run, and for various reasons that hasn't happened. But they got a favorable schedule to end the season. They're cooking right now, so obviously they're going to get a lot of buzz. But yeah, I mean, those big favorites like Buffalo, obviously they've been the favorite most of the year. Kansas City sort of overtook them a couple of weeks ago. Now Buffalo's the solid favorite. So look, I think it goes through Buffalo. I mean, obviously Kansas City is right there. The Eagles, the Niners, those teams you mentioned. You mentioned the Vikings. Whether they have a shot or not, I don't know. But those
Good
same
odds.
teams have been pretty much the second half of the season have been up there in terms of odds. So but at this stage of the game, it's almost like you're wanting to bet that long shot, like who could possibly give me a lot of bang for my buck, rather than betting the Bills at 3.5 to 1 or a 5 to 1 shot with the Eagles or Chiefs in that odds range. So the Chargers, I think, are a team that might be one that people are going to start taking notice of it if they produce on the field, obviously, just because the odds are so juicy. So look, we've seen it last year with the Bengals. If you get in, anybody's got a shot. So probably wise to go for something on the higher odds than betting one of the favorites, in my opinion. But look, everybody has their own way of doing things. But yeah, I think the Chargers seem to be a nice opportunity, and they've been seeing a lot more money. Obviously, you win games, you're going to get more attention, and people are going to see that, and they're going to bet on the team that's hot, going into the playoffs. So they still got some work to do, but the Chargers is one team I think we've seen a lot of money on come in lately.
I was really high on the Chargers earlier this season. I had some future bets on them to win the division, and then they kind of went down. And Justin Herbert, obviously getting hurt, affected a lot of that. But like you said, they're trying to win games again, and I do think that's like a very sneaky Super Bowl bet to put in. I also think, like you said, the Bengals at plus 750, not a high favorite, but certainly someone that could get in there. And if there's one kryptonite that Patrick Mahomes has, it's Joe Burrow. So that will be an interesting one as well. Adam, thank you so much for coming on Moxie Bets today. It was so insightful to have you on here. Is there anything else that you want the betting public to know?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, I'll say, like I sort of alluded to earlier, is that, just don't judge look at the records. You got to dig in deeper. I mean, look at the Texans, 1-12-1. Their last 2 weeks should have beaten the Cowboys, could have easily beaten the Chiefs. So just don't look at the records, and that goes with any sport. The records don't tell the whole story, especially in the NFL. You have so many teams in the NFL. They could be 5-9, could be 9-5. I mean, there's so many close games. There's a lot of parity in this league. When it comes to NFL betting, just sort of avoid the records. Dig deeper. Look at how they've played. Are there close losses? Are they blowout losses? Don't just like I said, the Texans should have literally won both those games.
Yeah.
And but their record is 112-1. If you just look at that on the surface, you think they're a bet against every week, but obviously it's you just can't have that strategy blindly and bet that way. So that's probably what I'd say. Just do a little more digging than looking at records as far as if that's how you want to make your bet. So there's a lot more to it than that.
Smart. Very, very smart. All right, Adam, thank you so much. That is the Assistant Director of Trading, Adam Pullen from Caesars Sportsbook. Make sure you follow Caesars on all of their social channels to stay up to date on what is going on with the book. Adam, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me on.
Time now for Mox Locks, my 3 best bets for Thursday night football between the Jets and the Jags. The line is pick'em, and I'm picking Jacksonville. There's a lot of talk about the Jets defense. However, Jacksonville's front has quietly been wreaking havoc on quarterbacks with consistent pressure. I was surprised to learn that the Jags actually blitz more than the Jets do, and they own the 6th highest pressure rate per dropback while ranking 8th in QB hits and hurries. One thing we know about Zach Wilson, well, he crumbles under pressure. Against the Lions last week, they threw quite a bit of blitz packages at him, and he had the worst completion percentage inside the pocket by any quarterback at 41%, and he was sacked 4 times. Trevor Lawrence has been playing lights out. He threw for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns against Dallas, who have one of the better defenses in the NFL. Look, again, the game is pick'em, and when it comes to the 2 top picks of the 2021 draft, I'm going with number 1. Doug Peterson, also 6-0 in TNF matchups throughout his career. Most of those, or all of those rather, are with Philadelphia, but Doug Peterson in prime time. Let's go. My second Mox lock, I'm taking Evan Engram for an anytime touchdown score. That's at plus 210. I really like him for everything in this matchup. Unfortunately, when I was capping the games this morning, Caesars did not have his prop lines available for yards and receptions. Definitely look at those when they are posted, but I love him for an anytime touchdown score. Engram has evolved to be one of Trevor Lawrence's favorite targets. He's racked up 19 receptions on 25 targets over the last 2 games alone. The Jets secondary has been pretty locked down when it comes to wide receiver 1s and 2s, but they have shown some weakness to tight ends, particularly in the last 2 games. Gangrene has given up the 7th most receptions to the position and a touchdown in each of the last 2 games to the tight ends. We all cashed on George Kittle big last Thursday night. He had 2 touchdowns. Why not keep it going and throw some more money on a tight end to get it done on Thursday night? And last but certainly not least, I'm taking Trevor Lawrence over 224.5 passing yards, also at plus money. Now, this line is interesting because it opened at 229.5 and has been bet down 5 whole yards. Bettors hammering the under here. Of course, this makes sense. The Jets cornerback group is among the best in the league, holding opposing QBs to the 7th least amount of yards per game this season, an average of just 213. However, I do think this is a good spot to exploit the betting market a little bit. Lawrence has eclipsed this number in 5 of his last 6 games, averaging well over this mark at 280 yards. He's also completed 130 of 181 passes and has thrown for 10 total touchdowns within those 5 games that he won. Jacksonville's O-line actually does a pretty decent job at protecting the passer, currently ranking 6th in the NFL. Should leave enough time for Lawrence to open up the field a bit against a pretty tough secondary. Gangrene also gave up 252 yards just to Jared Goff last week. And with no Quinnen Williams again, I like how low this number is. It's very favorable odds at plus money. Give me Trevor Lawrence over 224.5 passing yards. This has been Mox Locks presented by Caesars Sportsbook. We'll see you next time.